Alright, as you saw in the footage before this, I got my slightly working Vectrex working 100%. I got the one off eBay that had horizontal vectors were fine, but the vertical vectors didn't line up, they were skewed. And you can see in the video that now it works perfectly. So, I wish I could say I found the culprit and I fixed it. I'm not sure I did find the actual culprit. So, using this Vectrex, this is the other one I had, the one that I got locally that was working. I'll show you what I did. First thing, I bought the cap kits from Console 5. Highly recommended. They sell 2 Vectrex caps kits. One is all the electrolytic caps on the logic board and power board. The other one is to replace the styrene caps. That's these silver ones over here in this area. So remember, this is the Vectrex I have not done the cap kit to yet. I wanted to make sure I had one working before I worked on the other one, so I always have one that's a working machine. In case I mess something up, I can go back and look at the other one and see what went wrong. So, replace those capacitors, and it did not fix the problem. In fact, I didn't notice any real change at all. So, a little bit disheartened there, so I went back to the forums, and somebody suggested these 2 adjustment pots here, which adjust the skew of the vectors to some extent. He sprayed some kind of electronic contact lubricant stuff in them. Well, I didn't have that, but I had some electronic cleaner spray. So I put some paper towels around the pots so I wouldn't have overspray everywhere. I sprayed it in the back and kind of in the top, trying to get, into the actual potentiometer there. I worked them back and forth, left to right several times, trying to work the contact cleaner in there and get it to do its job. I then took some compressed air and blew as much of the excess contact cleaner as I could out. It does evaporate fairly quickly. But I then also left it for about 2-3 hours, and then I went and turned it on, and no change again. Well, at this point, I wasn't sure what to do. So I went back to the forums, and they said the next thing, in fact, if you read the service manual, I probably should have done it first. This potentiometer here needs to be at 0 volts when nothing is displayed on the screen. So what you do is you put 1 lead of your multimeter on this small IC, this chip right here, pin 1, and then the other on ground. I use the cable that connects the logic board to the power board. And then you run the test cart, and the test cart has a routine where it displays an image on the screen for a few seconds, and then it blanks it for about 6 seconds. When the screen is blank, you adjust that pot to read 0 volts. Well, I didn't have the test cart. I didn't have a multi-cart. So I ordered a multi-cart. Through no fault of the seller, the mail, it took a month for the mail to get here. So I was really impatient in that time. I wanted to see if I can get this thing running. So I found online instructions on how to take an existing cart, replace the ROM that's inside the cart with an EEPROM, and make your own multi-cart with a dip switch to select which game. So I did that, and I included the test ROM image. Meanwhile, this console had been moved off of this shelf onto another shelf for a couple weeks. So I put it back onto this shelf. I turned it on with my homemade multi-cart in, and the image was fine. And so then I was stumped. It had just sat there, so all I can figure is maybe the contact cleaner took a while to do its job. The first thing I think is cold solder joint. It would make it an intermittent problem, so if you jostle it around, you would have the problem come back. So I tapped on the various boards, tapped on the case, tapped on the tube. I could not get it to go back to the state it was in when I bought it, where the horizontal vectors were not displaying properly. They were skewed. So all I can assume is that the electronic cleaner in those potentiometers either was still too wet or didn't do its job in the couple hours I let it sit. I really can't say for sure, but it has been rock solid since. I did use my test cart and adjust the voltage on that back potentiometer. It was at 32 millivolts about when there was an image on the screen, so it was a little bit high, but not drastic. So I set it to 0, and I did some fine-tuning of those pots to get the image to look the way it does now, which is great. So, yeah, that's where I stand now. I now have 2 working Vectrex. This one is now going to get a cap kit since the other one's working. Always want to keep one working when I have 2 of something. And then I'm also working on the audio mod. People put an external amplifier to get rid of the internal amplifier that's on the power board. Here's the original audio cable that goes back there from the logic board up to the power board to where there's the audio amplifier, and then the speaker connections come back down and go to the speaker over here. Something in that design is what's giving it the hum, whether it's the wires quality, the wires running near the tube, or the yoke wires. I'm not sure. But that's the next step, is to work on that and try and get the buzz down. On the previous one that I fixed, I did run a shielded cable and took the audio from the back side of the power board and ran it to the front side of the power board here, as suggested on the Console 5 website, and it knocked the buzz down a little, but as you can hear in the video, it's still fairly loud. So this time I've actually got a cheap, like $3 audio amp from China. My first test on this unit, just kind of using the original audio cable for the audio input. I just unplugged it from the power board, plugged it into that amp, and then took 5 volts from this connector just by putting a piece of wire in there and alligator clip it to the wires going to this little audio amp. And I actually ended up having more buzz than I did with the stock setting. So, not sure if it was the wires I was using on the audio amp. I've now gone to different wires over there, and I'll work some more on that. But anyway, the main point of this story is that I got the other Vectrex working, and it might have been those 2 pots near the fuse area there. It might have just been the Vectrex fairy that came by and fixed it while it was sitting on the shelf for a couple weeks until I made my multi-cart and tried the machine again. I really can't say. But in the end, I now have 2 working Vectrex, and hopefully after installing this other cap kit, I'll still have 2 working Vectrex.